Tell me a little bit about your current research on gratitude. Did you and your colleagues have a hypothesis, and what was it that you were looking to prove?
Well, it sort of started as a new line of research for me. So about 7 years ago, I took on the directorship here at the center, and it was a time for us just to reflect on what we thought was important but not being studied that much in child development. And we had interests in things like social justice and environmental attitudes and consumerism and health and well-being. And gratitude seemed to touch on many of these things. So it became a common interest that we have faculty come together on. And we have faculty members from North Carolina State University, Duke University, University of North Carolina at Greensboro, and University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill involved in the project.
Tell me a little bit about the research.
We call this the Raising Grateful Children Project. And the goal, because we know very little about what gratitude looks like in kids, is to understand the development of gratitude and what parents do to socialize that.
Did you have a recent study that was published? And could you tell me a little bit about that?
We've had a few things published recently. We had something accepted this morning, so I can be very recent. So some of the work that we did initially was just trying to understand basic things that parents might be doing to foster gratitude. And we started by just asking parents, what do they think gratitude is in kids, and how do they know it when they see it? And asked for their ideas of what they're doing to foster gratitude. So our first piece of work really was about understanding and defining gratitude in children. And from that, we've come up with a way of thinking about gratitude as something that occurs in the moment, and that's how parents tend to think about it. Kids have moments when they're grateful or not grateful. And it's really about what kids are noticing in their lives to be grateful for, how they feel about those things, are they having positive responses to that, how they interpret why they've got them, how they think about them. So is it something given to them that they owe back? Is it something given to them freely? And then what they do about that. And so our idea of gratitude as being about what you notice, think, feel, and do is really coming out of some of this work from the focus groups.
How do you measure this in kids?
We spend a lot of time on how you measure this, and so one of the pieces we're working on now is pulling that together. But we think there's no perfect way to measure it, so we're trying to measure it a variety of imperfect ways to try to see if within that we have a better understanding.
How did you go about doing that?
We have parents fill out surveys, and we had them do it as a diary to try to understand on each day what they're seeing in their kids that relates to gratitude. We also had kids do scenario-based measures. So we would give them a scenario of a child maybe finding something and returning it to somebody else, and to see if they can put themselves in the place of that child to understand their gratitude responses.
So was there some work done here in the building or in the lab, plus the surveys at home, kind of a combination of the two?
Yeah, I mean, we started with a focus group, and then from there we started a longitudinal study with about 100 dyads. So they came in initially, they did some work on the daily diaries, and they came in a month later to do a survey. And we've seen them since then at an 18-month follow-up, and we're just now finishing up a 3-year follow-up.
What did you find from that 100 pairing of parents and children?
So what we found so far, and we're still learning, is that parents do think about gratitude as having these different components. And mostly what parents focus on when they socialize is what kids do. They forget to help their kids notice what to be thankful for and interpret it by focusing on their thoughts and feelings around gratitude. So they have a lot of emphasis on something that looks a lot like social manners. But that may not be gratitude. Even the 6-year-olds in our focus groups would say, she said thank you, but she didn't mean it. And they get that idea that gratitude is meaning it.
How do you go about teaching that to your child if you're a parent?
We think there are probably 4 big things parents do in addition to a lot of little things. But the first thing is model it. It's how you show your kid what gratitude looks like. And all of those parts of gratitude, not just what you do, but how you think about what you get and how do you make sense of the gifts around you. And then the second thing we think is really important is we talk about it as niche selection, the types of activities and events and places that you take your child to help them have the opportunity to see gratitude around them and experience it. And that might be things that people think about in terms of volunteering at a homeless shelter, but it could also be things like there's another family you have dinner with because you know that that family has a shared value with you. So it's a range of things that parents are doing with the intention of developing gratitude in their kids.
So that's more of the social aspect?
It's creating an environment that is consistent with what you're helping to teach your child.
Could you run down a list of some of the things your parents have said that they have done or tried in this path to developing gratitude?
Yes, I can do that. And I can also say we don't know what really works out of this list. This is what parents are trying. And so they are trying things like having kids involved in organizations that they think might be related to developing values of gratitude, like religious organizations or like service organizations. They also talk about having friends or families that they get together with who share that type of value. Trying to remember what else is on this list. There are about 30 items, so I'm missing a lot. I think some of the other things that we think about on that list are just really the types of after-school activities that kids are in, how parents are making those competing demand decisions about the extent to which gratitude is driving the types of activities you have your kid in versus all the other things that matter to us too as parents.
And as you mentioned, it's not just going out and doing community service. It goes beyond that.
It's beyond that. It's being around other people who are also grateful and modeling it, and people who provide kids with an opportunity to experience gratitude.
You had talked about 4, modeling and the selection. What were numbers 3 and 4?
The other 2 really have to do with how we talk to kids about gratitude, and there are 2 important types of gratitude conversations we think. One of them is how you talk about times when kids are grateful. So some parents would rather just let that go. It worked well, let's just move on. But we think it's important for parents to go back and talk with their kids about those times to reinforce what went well in those moments. The 4th one is a different gratitude conversation, and that's when they don't go well. So when children are missing the opportunity to be grateful, and may even slip all the way over to being entitled. And having those conversations is also something we think has to do with kids' gratitude development as well.
Is it easy for kids to slide from being grateful to being entitled? Is there a fine line, or is there a place where parents can start to recognize behavior and stop it and start moving their kids the other way?
I think these are each moments, and so kids have moments in both camps, right? So I tend to think about the gratitude moment as something that parents connect around rather than the grateful kid or the entitled kid. They each have moments in each camp, and the idea is to get as many moments on the gratitude camp as work for your family.
What is the benefit to doing this? What's the long-range outcome?
There are a number of benefits. If you look at the literature with adolescents and adults, you can see the benefit of kids who are more grateful in terms of better health outcomes, better social outcomes. So there's a ways of thinking about it with respect to sort of well-being and health. A very basic way of thinking about the benefits of gratitude is it actually connects one person with another and helps you identify those people in your life who are supports for you. So it has a lot to do with promoting social connection.
So people who are grateful are healthier?
That's what we're seeing in the literature. Lower rates of things like depression and some of the literature on heart disease, and so there's various literature with adults that we see this. For the younger kids under 10, we're still waiting to see what those correlates are.
So nothing that would link or suggest lower depression in kids or teens?
In teens, there's some data that shows that connection. We don't have a lot of data on this in kids yet. In our data, we're finding that there is a link between gratitude and things like having more empathy for others and better social skills.
How long of a process is this? Is this something that can be taught easily, or is this more of a process?
I think it's more of a process, and I think gratitude is something that exists on a range. So when kids are younger, they might do a really good job of noticing things that they should be grateful for and doing well-mannered acts of appreciation. So they might get the notice and do piece. but the thinking and feeling and connecting that to make sense of it takes longer. It takes perspective-taking skills. It takes being able to understand that someone else has a theory of mind and a way of thinking about things. So it's going to emerge over time. And the more you connect the dots between these pieces, we think the deeper the gratitude comes.
What do the findings from your research suggest?
I think in addition to understanding what gratitude is, some of our data does suggest that these 4 components of parenting are related to kids' gratitude. So we see each of these 4, the modeling, the niche selection, and the way you talk to your kids about gratitude as being correlated with how the parents perceive gratitude in their children.
What are next steps from this for you?
We are very excited about the next steps. We are in the middle of it right now and hope to finish soon, but we have developed an online training program for parents to help them have gratitude conversations, both about times when kids are grateful and when they've missed that opportunity. And now we're talking to tweens and parents. So we're taking skills that are about parent-adolescent communication and transferring into how you have conversations about gratitude itself, because some of these are hard. Missed opportunities are hard to talk about.
For our parents who are watching, how do you start that conversation?
Yeah, that's a great question. We think it has a lot to do with not just what you're going to say in the conversation, but how you say it. So picking a time when you're not rushed, picking a time when your kid can attend and pay attention with you and you can be together is a part of it. And we really think it's very important that you're listening in that conversation. So our goal in these conversations are that you understand where your child was coming from and they understand where you were coming from, before you worry about did they do the right thing in that situation. Because sometimes what looks like really entitled or ungrateful behavior is that your child is focusing on something very different than you. And so the way you want to intervene really is driven by how your child experienced the moment.
What do you say?
There's a whole variety of the right things to say. So I think it's not as simple as just having a kind of a clean set of lines that you can say. There are some wrong things to say. And I think things that have to do with emphasizing the child's behavior as being negative and always negative can be damaging because it feels like the kid has no opportunity for growing. Being harsh and sarcastic, which is something that parents feel in those moments, sometimes because they're embarrassed of their kid's behavior. Those are probably things to try to avoid. But being with your kid and listening to them and helping them be aware of what they can be grateful for, seeing if they can find that, and why they might be grateful for that, are ways we would direct parents.
Is there anything I didn't ask you that you would want people to know?
I think you really hit on most of the important things. I think one of the things that's very important is this grows and develops. And so even if you have a 6 or a 7-year-old and you're waiting to see if this child is going to be as grateful as another child that you've had, things change and grow. And there's places for parents to have input to how their children are going to develop over time, we think.
Good way to reinforce positive behavior for parents. Any suggestions?
Praise is a very powerful thing. And so one of the things we talk about when you talk about those gratitude moments with your children is to say how pleased you are with how it went. Specifically, what did they do that you liked?
You could give me a little bit of your background, where you had got your undergraduate, your master's, your advanced degrees.
Sure. So I got my undergraduate degree at Indiana University in Bloomington. And then I went out to the desert in Arizona State and got my master's and doctorate out there. And my degree is in clinical psychology, so I also did some clinical training in Los Angeles.